he stole it. He'd stolen it, And I did the whole number, man. Go back and apologize and return it. I'll never steal again, that.
Behind the cheerful songs and family warmth of the Partridge Family, a much darker story was unfolding. Shirley Jones, who played the loving mother on television, was dealing with real-life drama that would eventually push her to make a firm decision. She would never work with Danny Bonaduce again. To audiences watching at home, everything looked perfect. Shirley Jones appeared radiant and composed as the wholesome mother figure who held the fictional family together. She sang beautiful songs, smiled warmly, and seemed to manage her TV children with grace and wisdom. But away from the cameras and bright studio lights, Shirley was struggling with a situation that was becoming harder to handle each day. Danny Bonaduce wasn't just another young actor to Shirley. He was actually her real-life stepson, the child of her husband, Jack Cassidy. While viewers saw Danny as a sweet, quick-witted kid who delivered funny lines and charmed everyone, the reality behind the scenes was very different. Danny was like a storm that could change direction without warning, and Shirley found herself trying to manage chaos that seemed impossible to control. The situation was complicated because Shirley wasn't just acting like Danny's mother on the show. In many ways, she was forced to be one in real life, too. Danny's home situation was troubled and often dangerous. He experienced abuse and lived in an unstable environment that left him scarred and searching for attention in any way he could get it. Shirley often stepped in to help, sometimes even letting Danny stay at her house when things got too bad at home. At first, Shirley tried her best to take care of Danny. She wanted to give him the safe, stable environment that every child deserves. Her natural instinct was to protect him and help him heal from the trauma he had experienced. But what started as an act of compassion slowly became an overwhelming burden that followed her everywhere, even to work. Danny's unpredictable behavior didn't stay at home. The same energy that could flip from charming to destructive in seconds came with him to the television studio. While Shirley was expected to be the steady professional anchor of the show, Danny was cracking jokes at inappropriate times, pushing people's buttons, and sometimes creating tension that left everyone feeling exhausted and frustrated. People who worked on the show started to notice changes in Shirley. Some crew members quietly observed that she seemed more like a referee than a co-star when Danny was around. They could see her patience being tested, even though she tried hard to keep her composure for the cameras. What many didn't realize was how much this constant stress was wearing her down emotionally. Shirley had built her career on being disciplined, charming, and thoroughly professional. She took pride in keeping things graceful and running smoothly. But Danny's volatility became like a private nightmare that she couldn't escape. Even though the cameras never captured her true feelings, her frustration was real and growing stronger every day. The pressure was enormous. Shirley had to maintain the image of America's perfect television mother while dealing with a situation at work that felt more like managing a crisis than acting in a family comedy. She was carrying the weight of keeping the illusion alive for millions of viewers while privately drowning in responsibility she had never asked for. Friends and colleagues began noticing that Shirley looked more tired and burdened whenever Danny was around. The glowing television mom that America loved was actually a woman who was silently struggling with far more than anyone knew. She started asking herself difficult questions. How much longer could she keep this up? How much more could she take? The cameras loved Danny Bonaduce, and it's easy to understand why. His quick wit, mischievous smile, and clever one-liners made him a fan favorite. Viewers thought he was simply a funny kid playing the smart-aleck brother with perfect timing. But Shirley knew that those sharp comments often came from a much darker place inside him. Danny's difficult home life, including the abuse he suffered from his father, didn't just disappear when he came to work. That pain spilled into every part of his personality and behavior. He desperately craved attention, and when he didn't get it naturally, he found ways to demand it. Sometimes this was harmless, like interrupting a scene with an unexpected joke. But other times, his need for attention went too far and disrupted everyone's work. As both Danny's stepmother and his co-star, Shirley felt responsible for protecting him. But this responsibility came with a heavy emotional cost that grew heavier every day. There were times during filming when Danny's outbursts completely derailed entire scenes. The crew would become frustrated. Directors would lose their patience, but Shirley still had to keep smiling for the camera and pretend everything was fine. While the audience at home saw a happy, functional family on their television screens, Shirley was watching a troubled boy slowly unravel before her eyes. She worried constantly about what Danny might do next, whether he would sabotage an important scene or lash out at someone on the set. Every single day of filming became a careful balancing act for her, trying to hold the family image together while managing Danny's unpredictability. The situation blurred the lines between family life and work, life in ways Shirley had never expected when she took the job. Acting wasn't just her profession anymore. It had become constant emotional work that left her feeling drained. She was expected to be not just an actress, but also a therapist, babysitter, and crisis manager all at the same time. Shirley's patience began wearing thin, and though she rarely admitted it publicly, feelings of resentment started creeping into her heart. She had signed up to play America's sweetheart mother, not to handle all these extra responsibilities that had nothing to do with acting. Still, her professional instincts kept her from confronting Danny directly on set or letting her guard down in front of the cameras. She protected the show's image, but anyone who looked closely could see the strain in her eyes, strain that no amount of cheerful music or laugh tracks could hide. Believing she was doing the right thing, Shirley decided to invite Danny into her personal life and home. She had witnessed firsthand what Danny endured at his father's house, the yelling, harsh punishment, and emotional damage that no child should ever experience. As someone who was already raising 3 sons of her own, stepping in to help felt like the natural, caring thing to do. She opened her home to Danny, telling him that he was safe there and that she would take care of him. For a short time, this arrangement seemed to work well. Danny enjoyed the comfort, regular meals, and attention that came with being part of Shirley's stable household. But Shirley soon discovered that she hadn't just opened her home to a troubled child. She had opened what felt like Pandora's box. Danny brought the same whirlwind energy that disrupted the television set into her family's private space, except now this chaos wasn't limited to working hours. It was happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Danny could be incredibly sweet one moment and completely explosive the next, with no warning about which version of him would appear. There were stories of him raiding the kitchen in the middle of the night, playing pranks on Shirley's other children, and creating disturbances that never seemed to end. Shirley, who was already juggling the demanding responsibilities of being both a Hollywood star and a mother, now had to manage another child who seemed to need more attention than all her other children combined. The most difficult part was how the boundaries between work and home became completely blurred. At the television studio, Danny was her co-star, and she had to maintain a professional relationship with him. At home, he was her stepson, and she felt maternal responsibility for his well-being. Shirley found it impossible to separate these two roles, and this confusion created tension that followed her everywhere she went. When Danny misbehaved on the set, Shirley would carry that frustration home with her. When he caused problems in her household, she would bring that exhaustion back to work the next day. It became a vicious cycle that wore her down emotionally and physically. She felt trapped between her professional obligations and her personal desire to help a child who had been hurt. Despite feeling overwhelmed, Shirley kept trying to make the situation work. Her instinct to protect Danny never completely disappeared, no matter how drained she felt. She defended him to producers when they complained about his behavior. She asked her own children to be patient and understanding with him. She tried to convince herself that if she just gave him enough love and stability, he might calm down and begin to heal from his traumatic experiences. But deep in her heart, Shirley was starting to realize a painful truth. Her attempts to rescue Danny weren't actually saving him or helping him get better. Instead, they were slowly drowning her in responsibility and stress that seemed to have no end. Every day felt heavier than the last. Every interaction felt more strained and difficult. What had begun as a noble act of compassion was gradually turning into regret, though Shirley wouldn't dare admit this out loud to anyone. The Partridge Family set was supposed to be a place of joy, filled with music, laughter, and the kind of wholesome entertainment that made families feel good about watching together. But once the cameras stopped rolling, Danny Bonaduce often transformed the peaceful studio into something that felt more like a circus, and Shirley found herself stuck right in the middle of it all. Danny's behavior was completely unpredictable, which made every day stressful for everyone around him. Some days he would be the comic relief that everyone enjoyed, lifting people's spirits between takes and making the work environment more fun. But the next day, he might throw tantrums, make inappropriate jokes, or test the patience of every adult in the room until they reached their breaking point. People who worked on the show remembered how Danny constantly pushed boundaries and tested limits. While some dismissed this as typical behavior for a child actor, Shirley saw it very differently. To her, it wasn't just harmless mischief or normal kid behavior. It was chaos that was steadily eating away at the show's harmony and making everyone's job much harder than it needed to be. There were incidents where Danny would throw props around the set, turn serious rehearsals into his personal playtime, or pick fights with other cast members for no apparent reason. What looked like an innocent, goofy grin on screen often masked deeper frustration and anger that was bubbling just beneath the surface. Since Shirley had taken Danny under her wing at home, everyone expected her to be able to control his behavior at work too. Producers relied on Shirley to keep Danny in line, believing that her maternal relationship with him gave her special influence. But every time she had to step in and handle a situation Danny had created, it chipped away at her resolve and energy. Even when Shirley tried to laugh off his behavior and pretend it didn't bother her, the stress continued building up inside her. She found herself juggling multiple exhausting roles every single day. She had to be the polished, professional star that audiences expected to see. She had to be a surrogate mother figure to Danny when he needed guidance. And sometimes she even had to be a reluctant disciplinarian when his behavior crossed the line. More than once, she went home feeling completely drained from trying to manage all these different responsibilities. The chemistry between the cast members that made the show such a hit with audiences was actually fueling resentment and tension behind the scenes. The worst moments came when Danny's outbursts disrupted entire shooting days, forcing them to reshoot scenes, rearrange schedules, and wait for tempers to cool down. Each time this happened, Shirley was caught in the crossfire, expected to smile for the cameras while dealing with the storm that was brewing just off camera. For Shirley, acting stopped being about creativity and artistic expression. Instead, it became about survival, just getting through each day without everything falling apart. Over time, the joy she had once felt while performing was replaced with a quiet sense of dread. The set, which should have been a place of creative escape and professional fulfillment, became a place she associated with tension, unpredictability, and constant stress. The maternal instinct that had originally driven her to protect Danny at home now felt like a burden both professionally and personally. She was running out of energy, and even worse, she was running out of patience. And then, one day, it finally happened. All of Shirley's bottled-up frustration reached its absolute limit in a moment that would change everything. Every parent, even one as graceful and composed as Shirley Jones, eventually reaches their breaking point. For years, she had managed her dual roles as the star of the Partridge Family and as the person responsible for managing Danny Bonaduce's unpredictable behavior. But there was one particular moment, one specific incident, that finally convinced her that enough was enough. The exact details of what happened vary depending on who tells the story, but everyone agrees that Danny's behavior escalated to a point where it could no longer be dismissed as harmless childhood antics. Some people who were there claim that Danny completely lost his temper during a rehearsal, storming off the set in a fit of rage after making cruel comments to a crew member. Others remember him openly defying the director's instructions and talking back to producers in a way that left everyone in the room sitting in stunned silence. Regardless of the specific details, everyone who witnessed the incident agrees on one important fact. Shirley Jones had finally reached her absolute breaking point. But true to her character, she didn't explode or lose her temper in response. That simply wasn't her style. Instead, she became very quiet, very calm, and very decisive about what needed to happen next. After years of patience, years of trying to balance compassion with growing frustration, Shirley drew a clear line in her mind. Once the cameras stopped rolling for good on the Partridge Family, she would never, under any circumstances, work with Danny Bonaduce again. The line between being his stepmother and being his co-star had become so blurred that it was beyond repair, and the emotional toll it had taken on her spirit wasn't something she was willing to experience again. It wasn't just Danny's outbursts and disruptive behavior that finally broke her resolve. It was the constant pressure of carrying the weight of his trauma, his volatility, and his desperate need for attention. Shirley had sacrificed her own peace of mind to try to keep him afloat emotionally, all while maintaining the image of America's perfect television mother. This responsibility had become draining, thankless, and ultimately unsustainable. Shirley's silence after the show ended said everything that needed to be said, while their cast members occasionally reunited for special projects or spoke fondly about their time working together. Shirley's distance from Danny was noticeable to everyone. She didn't publicly criticize him or say negative things about him in interviews. She didn't need to. Her refusal to work with him again spoke louder than any public statement ever could have. Danny noticed Shirley's distance, and over the years, he has admitted to being an extremely difficult child to manage. He has even acknowledged that Shirley's patience with him was saint-like compared to what his behavior actually deserved. But by the time he developed this self-awareness, the damage to their relationship was already done. The warmth and care that Shirley had once extended to him had hardened into a quiet but firm boundary that she was not willing to cross again. That silent promise she made to herself, never again, wasn't just about Danny and his behavior. It was about Shirley reclaiming her sanity, her dignity, and her career. She had played the role of caretaker for long enough, but she refused to let that role define the rest of her professional life. She had given all she could give, and she knew that she couldn't survive giving any more. The real reason Shirley Jones refused to ever work with Danny Bonaduce again wasn't about bitterness, jealousy, or spite. It was about self-preservation. She had spent years carrying the weight of his emotional turmoil, trying to shield him when no one else would, and attempting to be both mother and co-star in a situation that demanded far too much of her. By the end of the Partridge Family, she knew she had already sacrificed too much of herself in the process. In the end, Shirley chose peace over chaos, stability over volatility, and silence over enduring another emotional storm. Her decision represents the quiet courage it takes to set boundaries, even when it means walking away from someone you care about. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to recognize when you've reached your limit and protect yourself from further harm.